Hi guys, Ryan Bailey here, bringing you episode 29 of the Ball Talk podcast. In this episode I was joined by Gaelic Games referee David Gough. Throughout the next 40 minutes I quiz David on the GAA rulebook. We talk about his favourite moments as a referee and how GAA clubs are adapting to restrictions and implications amidst COVID-19. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, leave a like on this video and follow the page on Instagram by searching at Ball Talk podcast. And I hope you enjoyed the podcast. So, episode number 29 of the podcast, we're getting closer to 30, even closer to 50. And today I've had musicians, I've had comedians, I've had footballers, hurlers, soccer players, actors, TikTokers, you name it. But the first referee on the podcast for episode 29, David Gough. David, you're very welcome to Ball Talk podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me on, Reen.
This is a podcast, no more than the podcast with Mick Constantine. It's one that's been in the works for a while, so thankfully we've got around to do it. I finally got back onto Twitter. I was on to David probably 3-4 months ago now to get this sorted, but we finally got around to it. David, as I said before we came on, don't want to beat around the bush. We'll get straight into things, into the content that we want to get at. Recently, of course, with COVID-19 coming into play and football being cancelled, football coming back, people have clubs have sort of changed their mind, players have changed their mind. Your mindset at the moment, are you coming back to refereeing anytime soon, or have you come back in the last while?
Yeah, I have come back most recently to do underage games in Meath. It wasn't a decision that I took lightly. I made a very public, I don't want to say I made a statement. I answered a question on radio on 2FM back in May and said that I wouldn't come back possibly without a vaccine or while social distancing was still an issue. I suppose we're 4 or 5 months down the line from that, and we know an awful lot more about the disease, the spread of the disease, and the information coming from GAA and from NEF. It seems that football pitches are safe places for referees and players to operate. The 71,000 children that completed their school camps during the summer safely was an extraordinary number, and to have only one COVID case among that, which couldn't be actually linked to the GAA activities on the field, really helped me make my decision. So I contacted Meath County Board a couple of weekends ago, told them I was coming back, but that I'd only referee underage games. I did get called in last minute to do one senior championship game, and I didn't want to let them down. I did it, but since then I've continued just to referee at under 13 level and minor level within the county, and it seems to be fine.
And as you were saying there, of course, you had said, and I know the media covered it a lot when you'd made the initial decision to step away from refereeing until there was a vaccine. Do you still have that bit of hesitation when you step out onto the field? Is it in the back of your mind?
It is, yeah. It definitely is. But at the moment, I'm taking part in underage games where there's not as much happening, and there's probably more social distancing rather than senior inter-county games. The pace is different. The time length you're actually on the field is an awful lot shorter than would be at senior matches. I'm still a little bit hesitant. I do arrive on my own in my own car, ready to go. The only things I handle are my coin, my whistle, the ball at the start of the match. And unfortunately, I have to receive team lists, assign them in Irish. That's the one thing that I'd like to see a small change in if this is to move forward. Maybe that either team lists are emailed to the referee, or that we could just take a picture of them on our phones and send them in with the match report. But apart from that, it seems to be very safe. I don't know whether because the clubs know it's David Gough that's coming, or whether it's just been great practice in Meath. But there's always been a COVID supervisor when I've arrived. They've met me. They've had all their hand gels and hand sanitizers installed around the club, and it just seems to be a very safe practice at the moment. But that doesn't mean I still don't feel that little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah. And is there any situations on the field, and I know you've said it's mainly underage games that you're reffing, but are there any situations on the field that kind of makes you go, geez, like, you shouldn't be doing that? If it's something like, players supposedly not supposed to shake hands, or if they're, spitting on the ground, stuff like that, is supposedly a yellow card offence, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, no, it's players spitting can now be seen. Well, it's always been seen as a red card offence because it's behaving in a manner dangerous to an opponent. You never know what anyone carries in their bodily fluids, so that's why that's seen as a red card offence. The one thing that I've seen, just from the one senior championship match I did, and it'll be no come as no surprise to most people who know the way I referee, are mouth guards. And in the match concerned, I had to send some players to get mouth guards, and as is unfortunately normal practice, they don't have them with them, and they're going to the substitutes bench to take one from the substitute or a supply bag that seems to be just left at the side of the field. That's one thing that I'm a little bit concerned about. But again, really, it's not really my concern. That those players are there to look at. They should be looking after themselves. So if they're using someone else's mouth guard or picking one out of a bag, I don't see that as safe practice. I'm not concerned about it, but I would be concerned for them.
Yeah. And because the mouth guard rule is probably in 5 years now, 6 years now.
Oh, it's in more. It's in January 2013. It was first brought in. So we're almost 7 years, over 7 years down the line. So we're at a stage where this just should be run of the mill sort of. This is just normal practice on a football field.
So your return to refereeing, and everyone's return to games, and people maybe weren't expecting to play any football in 2020 at all. There were rules brought in that a lot of people probably forgot about, half forgot, half didn't. Some teams used them to their advantage. I'll ask you about your thoughts on the rules first, and the amount of rule changes that have been trialled and brought into the GA in the last while. Do you think that there was need for any rule changes at all, or I know there will be some that were needed, but what's your opinion on the whole rule change, the constant changing?
I've a couple of opinions on it, I suppose. First of all, we need to look at why the committee is bringing in rule changes. They probably believe that the game needs to be changed to make it more attractive. They look at a set fixed amount of data that they get from data analysts in relation to gameplay, and they try and bring in rules to make the game more attractive to watch. That's fine. Do I feel Gaelic football is unattractive to watch? Probably in comparison to hurling, but they're two different sports. So if you put Gaelic football in comparison to soccer, well, Gaelic football is more attractive to watch than soccer, in my opinion. But I do understand why the committee feel the need to bring in some rules to make the game more attractive to watch. That's fair enough. I do have an issue with them bringing in constant new rules all the time, trialing them, and I find it very difficult. I have been a huge advocate for many years of getting rid of all the rules in certain areas, maybe not the technical fouls, but the aggressive ones. There are over 100, I think 110, maybe 112 rules in our book, technical, aggressive, and dissent, which would cover rules 4, 5, and 6. And that's a huge volume of rules for any referee to learn. The language of them is quite difficult. So you have to remember the language of 110 different rules. But then you also have to remember the implication of those rules. Is it a free? Is it a throw ball? Is it a free and a note, a free and a yellow card, a free and a red card? There's a massive volume of information there to be learned. And just for some people, it's just not possible. And with the best intentions in the world, referees go out to referee matches fairly. But sometimes just the massive amount of rules that they have to know, it's just not there. I really feel our rule book was written back in I think it was in the 80s. It's difficult to read, it's difficult to understand, and it's difficult to implement. And if we want to see real consistency in the game, we need to stop bringing in these rules, because next year when the GA see something they don't like in Gaelic football, they'll bring in a rule to stop it happening. Give you a classic example. Lee Keegan throws his GPS at Dean Rock at the end of an All-Ireland final, and everyone starts to give out about it. The GA bring in rule number 113 now to stop that. Next year they see something different, rule 140, and it's just loading up the work on the referee the whole time. So I would like to see a paring back of the rules to make the game easier for us to referee.
Definitely, because I know, as you said, rules brought in to make the game better and make it more competitive. And if there's a lot of hand passing in the game, there's the rule that was brought in trial last year at the start of the league to no more than 3 hand passes. That's like, from a player's point of view and from manager as well, like like helping out with underage teams and stuff like that. That's not something that the GAA needs to change. That's what a team needs to do to counteract that. If another team is playing a hand passing game, you've got to counteract that and take the ball off them. And do you know where I'm coming from as well?
I do. I see it needs not only come from the GA, but it needs to come from a coaching perspective and a player enjoyment perspective. Particularly at underage, children at underage want to play football. They want to enjoy themselves. We need to remember that the ideas of leagues, championships, and knockouts are adult imposed models on children. If we give children a football and they go out and they will put down jumpers, they will make two teams. If one team is beating the other, the children naturally will say, you go on that team and we'll take this player. And they'll swap around to balance up the teams. That is inherent in children. It's adult imposed models and structures that ruins the game, that tell the children, well, you have to play this style of football. You have to have so many back in defence. We're playing a sweeper. I don't want you to kick the ball. I want you to keep possession and hand pass it up the field. Again, it's adult imposed models, mindsets, and a win at all costs mentality that changes it from underage levels right the way up to senior.
Definitely, yeah. And another thing as well, and there's other points I want to move on to, but as you're saying there with the underage system, it's about playing football and that. Do you feel amalgamations are kind of going against that as well?
Amalgamations, I suppose, are as a result of teams not being able to field at a certain age levels, and to give opportunities to the players in those clubs and members to play games, amalgamations need to happen. But I'm a huge advocate. I'm a primary school teacher. I know the benefit of small-sided games, participation, 100% participation, 100% of the time. So if you arrive to a game and you have 9 players, well, then those 9 players get to play. Or if you arrive to a game with 7 players, it's a full 7-a-side game if it's under 7s, under 8s. Everyone gets a go. I don't like this idea, certainly up to the age of under 12, of substitutes on sidelines. I mean, it's a real deterrent for children, particularly in primary schools. They need to be active. They need to be introduced to a wide variety of sports, but be allowed to participate in them. There's nothing worse than hearing a child saying to you, you know, I went to my match Saturday morning. You hear from them on a Monday morning, and I'd say, how did you get on? And well, I didn't get to play. That's heartbreaking. So small-sided games, if amalgamations need to happen to make those teams possible, well, that's just part of the situation we're in. But I will be a massive advocate for 100% of the children, 100% of the time.
I should probably have worded the amalgamations a bit better. In terms of amalgamations, yes, I agree with you on what you're saying. Amalgamations, if the numbers aren't there, but there are amalgamations, and I'm sure they're happening all over the country for quality over quantity.
I do understand that. So there will be amalgamations where clubs want to compete at a higher level. They want to be competing in Division 2 and 1 of a championship rather than having one team competing at Division 6 or 7. And that's an unfortunate byproduct of managers and coaches looking for success at high levels rather than creating young people who want to be lifelong members and players within the association.
And you'll see that as a primary school teacher as well. There will be children and even teenagers that will one year be playing at an under 14 level. All of a sudden their club amalgamates with another by their stronger year of under 16. They're not playing anymore because they're not getting playing for the amalgamation. That's just the unfortunate way it is.
Yeah, and it's not a great system, to be honest, because we should have these young people involved at all levels and keep them as lifelong members of the association. Most members of our association are over the age of 35 and not participating in the playing of games. They're still club secretaries, spectators, club chairmen, they're physios for their club, they're wash the jerseys. I mean, there's a huge sense of community involved, and we need to kind of nurture that community. And if that means providing playing opportunities for children, no matter what it is, that should be the primary focus, not winning the Division 1 title as an amalgamated club.
Definitely. Something I noticed, as I said, back on Twitter the last week or so, the hashtag #AskGoughy, I suppose it's a trending topic now. It's as we were talking about the rule changes and rule clarification, it's something that's opened my eyes. to the amount of rules that as a player, and I'm sure coaches and referees as well, that don't know the ins and outs of these rules, because there's so many changes and so many, so many of the small print, I suppose you could say, that people don't know about. Has there been any questions for anyone that doesn't know what I'm talking about as well?
Well, this just came out by chance because I get sent an awful lot of messages on Twitter, private messages that go into my message requests about scenarios in games or rules that they don't understand, or is there a rule to cover this type of situation? And I would always have gotten back to people. It might have taken a couple of days, a week. And I had toyed with the idea of using clips from inter-county games to explain rules at the start of quarantine, but I just felt it was too much work, and sometimes you can't find the right clip to match the rule. So I left it, and a couple of weeks ago, I got tired of answering privately, and I kind of thought, you know what, if you ask people for permission to use a screenshot of their question and write a response, screenshot it and put the two of them together in a tweet, it would be a great way of me not having to answer the same questions over and over again privately, but it would open it up to a huge forum of people who maybe have a misunderstanding or a lack of education in relation to the rules. So I would safely say that 95% of the people involved in Gaelic games, playing and coaching, have never read the rule book. If they have read the rule book, it may have been a rule book 10 years ago, but that has changed. A new rule book within the GA is printed every April because of changes at Congress. So unless you've read the 2020 version, you're already out of date. So it was a great opportunity for me to explain rules, because I understand as a young person, when I was playing, I got my knowledge of the rules from my teachers, my coaches, my parents, or pundits on the TV. Most of them had never read the rule book, and they were passing on misconceptions in the rule as well to us as young people. So this was an opportunity for me. And I have to say, the response has been great. Some of the questions that have come in and some that have still have to go up have been absolutely brilliant. And I thoroughly enjoy sitting down, thinking about them and thinking about how best to answer them in rule. And it's been a wonderful time filler for me over the past fortnight.
Definitely. And it's, as I said there just a minute ago, it's a new insight as a player as well to rules that, like, I didn't know the whole system of, like, you think automatically, oh, you're going to get a tick, and then you get a yellow, then you get a red. But there's instances where there's 2 tickets for certain fouls and stuff like that too. But is there any questions that you've got where you went, seriously, like, people don't know this rule? Has there been any occasions like that so far?
Yes, someone asked me, could they pick up a rolling ball? When I read it, I kind of thought, my God, are we still at that level? Like, is that where we're at, Or another one, like, just for anyone that has that misconception, the ball is rolling on the ground. It's not rolling on anything else. You can't touch a ball on the ground. There was another one recently. Oh, yes, yeah. Is there a different set of rules for wet day football? And I was flabbergasted at that, like, as if I was going to go out and because the day was wet, I was going to implement a different set of rules. It was just something that they were the two that stuck out for me, that were really, really strange. But that is sort of, and I don't mean ignorance in a bad way. I mean ignorance in relation to a lack of education. There is an ignorance around the rules of Gaelic football. And
I've 2 for you myself. Because one,
you're putting me on the spot here. But come on, Reid.
I don't want to, but it happened in a recent club championship game for ourselves. Picking the ball off the ground inside your own box.
Mm-hmm. So to touch the ball on the ground is a foul, and any foul, be it aggressive fouls, which are fouls on the player, or technical fouls, which are fouls on the ball, which in this case, to touch the ball on the ground is a technical foul, inside the small rectangle is a penalty. Any foul inside the small rectangle is a penalty. The only person that can handle the ball inside the small rectangle is the goalkeeper.
If it was just in the box then as well?
So if it was inside the large rectangle but outside the small rectangle, a technical foul in that zone is a 13-meter free.
Okay. And the second, because it happened, I'll explain it to you. It happened in a club game senior championship semi-final at the weekend where in the space of 3 minutes there were two instances from one end of the field to the other where the ball was handled on the ground, and the first one there was a free in given which was overruled, and the second one was a handling on the ground which is given for a penalty. And there was, like, naturally there's going to be uproar over it and all that, but no, that was just for myself for a bit of clarification. So as you said, foul on the ball inside the small rectangle is a penalty, inside the large rectangle is 30-metre free.
A 13-metre free,
yeah,
for those technical fouls.
Technical fouls. So the second one then is there. I could be wrong here in saying this, but is there an instance where a player can handle the ball on the ground, as in like punch it away? Is there something to do with if you catch the ball and you fall to the ground and you can punch it away if you lose it then?
Yeah, so that's kind of just a safety rule within the GA that not many people know about. But what is key here is the language of possession and fall or knock. So the rule says if a player is in possession of the ball and falls or is knocked to the ground while in possession, so you have to be in possession of the ball while going to the ground, you may play the ball away from you using your fist, and you may score a goal in doing so.
Okay.
So that is key. So when you have the ball and are either charged to be knocked to the ground, that means a fair charge, a shoulder to shoulder, side to side charge, or fall, that you're in possession of the ball going to the ground, you can knock the ball away with your fist, and you may score a goal in doing so.
There could be people listening to the podcast that will go out in a club game next weekend, and this could happen to them, and they will say that I did it right, but the referee could turn around and say, no, you're wrong. But is that just the unfortunate circumstance that is that referees aren't trained enough?
Yeah, it's not that they're not trained enough. It's an obscure rule. It's probably one that doesn't happen very, very often in Gaelic games. I do have a number of referees who do message me privately on Twitter as well and say that they love the Ask Offie because it clarifies an awful lot of questions that they're not able to get clarified for them within their own clubs or within their own county. There's a number of things with issues around refereeing. First of all, when the questions come into me, or like a question you've given, or like the scenario you've given where the player feels he's done the right thing, we have to remember sometimes that the referee's view might be different to the player's. So what the player feels he has seen, the referee might feel he's seen something different. That's the first thing. So that's a judgment call. If there's an error in fact, however, that's almost a little bit unforgivable for a referee. So what I mean in that is, if the referee sees something happening but makes an error in the fact of the rule, well, he should know the rules. He shouldn't be out there unless he knows the rules. So, for instance, if the ball was picked off the ground in the large square and he gave a penalty for it, that's an error in fact. He's seen the ball has been touched in ground. He's blown for the foul, but he's given the wrong decision. He's given a penalty instead of a 13-metre free. That's an error in fact. Whereas if one player feels, well, that ball was touched on the ground, and the referee feels, well, no, it wasn't, it was slightly off the ground, that's a judgment. And referees should be forgiven for errors in judgment, because it may not even be their error in judgment, it may be the player's error in judgment. So I would always say that for a referee, errors in judgment are forgivable, but errors in fact aren't.
I wouldn't have looked at it that way myself. But
it's just a different viewpoint coming from a referee, because players obviously think different to referees. We think in a different mindset.
Just to bounce on to, I suppose, another topic, and it's surrounding rules as well. I'm not sure, I don't want to go mincing my words here, but it was either an interview that you did with Sports Joe or with Off the Ball, I'm not sure which one, but it was where you were asked about if you could bring in a rule into Gaelic games, and I want you to explain it to me because I thought it was fascinating. Was the one about you said they use it in the hockey for
the green card.
The green card, yeah.
I absolutely love this idea, and if it is the only thing I have ever seen that I thought, oh my God, can we have that in Gaelic games? And how it happened was, I was invited to speak to the National Hockey Umpires Association at their annual AGM, and I was quite honoured to be asked to go and speak as a guest speaker to a number of officials. including some who had officiated at Olympic Games. But I had never been to a hockey match before, and rather than go into the room and try and bluff my way through, I spoke to the chairman and I said, look, is there a few hockey games over the next couple of weeks that I can go and see how you guys operate, because I'd like to get a better knowledge of the game? And there were. And over the course of a month, I went and watched 3 matches. In hockey, if management abuse the match official from the sideline, shout in any sort of abuse, or openly disagree with the decision, the referee calls the captain over and produces a green card. The captain is automatically sent off to a sin bin for 2 minutes because of the behaviour of the management team. And it's absolutely fantastic. It's happened once when I saw it, and it just cut out all sorts of abuse coming from the sideline, because the team was down 1 player, but they were also down what is perceived to be the most valuable player on the team. And you can imagine, and I know it would never happen with Jim, because Jim was such a calm man on the sideline, but the implications for Dublin if Jim abused a match official and Stephen Cluxton was put into the sin bin for 2 minutes or 5 minutes, whatever it would be in a game of football. And it was just a huge deterrent for management, selectors and Mayor Fernia to stop abusing match officials.
Is that a rule that you'd like to raise to be brought into the GA, like an official, as like an AGM or whatever?
Yeah, that's the great thing about the GAA is there is that avenue for my club, under my advice, to put a motion into Congress to bring in a rule like that. And I would love to see it brought in, and I love that. And there are many other rules that I would like to see brought into the GAA, but that was the one that I would have picked out as the one that I saw would have most beneficial effect around the raising of respect for match officials. Yeah,
I'd be all for it as well, because once I heard it, I thought it would be. You can imagine, as you said, with Jim Gavin and Stephen Cluxton, the scenarios that it creates, it can turn the game on its head for whatever it is, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it may be, and it kind of halves the abuse that a referee could get as well.
It does, yeah, it does. It's just a fantastic idea, and I think obviously someone thought a lot about it in hockey, about raising the respect level for referees, and they managed it with one simple rule change.
On the topic of abuse for referees, do you find that at an inter-county level, would you find it worse at an inter-county level or a club level, or is there a difference that do you find?
There's a huge difference, yeah. At inter-county level, you're dealing with elite athletes, elite management systems, elite managers, and just a whole elite setup, including elite referees. The players on the field have a job to do for 70 minutes. They know that the referee they have on the day is operating at an elite level as well and has an excellent knowledge of the rules. So there's very little scope for abuse at inter-county games. Yes, we do get things wrong. I'm not saying we don't. And yes, players do openly disagree with our decisions, but most of us are good communicators and we can work through it, and we have a good rapport with the players. At club games though, however, I would see, because I'm an elite referee and maybe implementing the rules at the best level that I know how, and you have to put that in comparison to the lack of knowledge that a club player might have in depth of the rules, and they just don't understand what you're doing, and you're trying to talk them through a game, and the abuse levels can be a little bit more, I suppose, vocal at club level, maybe more so from the sidelines. I'm sure I get it from the stands in Croke Park, but I just can't hear it. But if you're in Meath on a Saturday evening refereeing a championship match, and there's only 100 people at it, well, you're definitely going to hear someone roaring at you to let you know that they disagree with your decision. The usual thing that gets shouted at me is, "Gough, you're not on the telly now," this sort of stuff. So, I laugh at some of it. I'm fortunate enough now to be at a level where the majority of players have a nice amount of respect for my refereeing style and my decisions. So I don't suffer much from it. But I would also say that that's because of a number of things. I implement all of the rules all of the time. It doesn't matter what rule it is. Some people have this idea that rules are small rules and that's a big foul and a little foul. No. If you break a rule while you're on the field with me, you're going to get pulled from it. So people used to think that, oh, he's a good referee because he lets the game flow. Well, I don't let the game flow. I call all of the fouls all of the time. What actually happens in my matches is, particularly at intercounty level, the players going out onto the field know that David Gough is refereeing and he's going to call everything. So they play within the rules. So it's not the job of the referee to let the game flow. The game actually flows when the player plays within inside the rules. And that's how games flow. It's just a mindset flip. You know, some fella will roar at you, oh, will you ever let the game flow? What am I supposed to do? Decide that I'm not going to blow that foul this time because I don't want to. I just want the game to flow. No, if the players play inside the rules, the game flows. There's no need for me.
In terms of the abuse, that, so as you said, the club abuse would be that bit worse than intercounty. Was there ever a time, even in your earlier years as a referee, where a match went, in terms of the abuse, not in terms of the way you referee the game, but I mean in terms of the abuse that you got, that you just said, this isn't for me?
It's never. I don't know whether I said this isn't for me. I suppose it was the shock level of it. Post the Dublin Kerry semi-final in 2016, where I had missed the unfair charge that Kevin McMenamin made on Peter Crowley, and I mean 2 minutes later I'm blowing up the game. Dublin have won by 2 points. I don't realise that I've made a mistake. I'm walking off the field, and the torrent of abuse coming from the Cusack stand. I mean, I had Fanta bottles, water bottles, match programs. I have never seen that. I have never seen it since or before. You know, rain down on top of me from the Cusack stand. The abuse was vitriolic. It was homophobic. It was just nasty. And I didn't understand why I was getting it, because I didn't know at that time leaving the field that I had made such an important mistake. I suppose in the dressing room afterwards, I didn't know what was so bad about my performance that I deserved that type of reaction walking off the field. And unfortunately, a key game decision at the end of a game like that, irrespective of the standard of refereeing that has gone on for 70 minutes, if you make a key game decision wrong in the last minute or two, that's the decision you're going to be judged on in relation to your performance.
Yeah, that's just it. Because even as from looking at a player as well, like that 3 seconds of a decision, a player could go out and score a goal in 7 in a game and miss at the last point to win it. That's what's thought about, as you said.
It's so comparable. It could be missing the point, and like, we know players don't go out to kick the ball wide. You know, no different than I don't go out to make a mistake genuinely, but it happens. It's human nature. But if a player kicks the ball wide and makes a mistake, he certainly isn't subject to the amount of criticism that a referee would get if he makes a mistake or human error. And that weighs heavily on referees. And I suppose that's the biggest stressor for referees before games, particularly at knockout stages, that we know that if we make a mistake on a key game decision, that this team that has trained together all year and has put so much effort into competing at the top level within whichever championship they're in, are going to be knocked out because of a mistake we make. That is a huge stressor for us before games.
As you're saying there with the All-Ireland final, you spoke about the mistake incidentally in the last couple of minutes of the game. But on the flip side of that, you had just finished refereeing an All-Ireland final. And I want to talk about your proudest moment as a referee. What would that be if you were to pick one, or you could pick a few if you like?
My proudest moment, I suppose, would have to be post All-Ireland final last year, in the centre of the field with my family. It was nice to know afterwards, just in those few minutes afterwards, that where we met on the way off the field, that we had done our job. We had done it to the best of our ability. Actually, we had done it to such a good standard that we could almost say we performed as well as any of the top players in the country did for their team that day. We really nailed our performance, and that was a real proud moment to do that. But to do that with 4 members of your own family was absolutely fantastic, and it's a moment that I'll always look back on with with great pleasure. I don't know whether I'll ever reach the heights of those performances again, but it's certainly something that I'll always remember fondly. That was definitely one of my greatest highlights. Outside of that, there's go ahead, Reid.
Before you move on there, as you said with your family, you members of your family are the umpires, isn't that right?
That's right. So my dad and my cousin Dean, so that's my dad Eugene, my cousin Dean, operate one end of the field, and my uncle Terry and my brother Stephen operate the opposite end. They've been with me since 2008. I have never gone to a match without all of them or two of them. They're always with me. They're absolutely fantastic. Their knowledge of the rules is every bit as good as mine. Unfortunately, you guys don't get to hear the volume of information that comes from them throughout the match through our referee match communication system. It's non-stop. There's no way with my guys, and I set the expectation for my umpires. Other referees give their umpires different directives, and that's within their own prerogative. But with my guys, you're not going to be able to foul off the ball behind the referee's back and not get pinged for it. And that also lends itself to the very open style of football that happens when we're officiating our matches.
Just as you were saying that there, that as spectators, as players, as members outside of refereeing, we don't get to see and hear the conversations that go on between you. You've seen it yourself, and you know, as we know tonight, because we're recording this on Thursday, tonight, RT have the new Gales documentary out. There was the Ballymun Kickham's documentary, Passing It On, that they repeated there a few weeks ago. I think that a documentary with in the year of a referee, I suppose, or even a program dedicated to that, whether it be yourself, if it's a Leinster Championship game or a Super 8s game or even a club game, just to hear what's going on with you. But as you said there with the umpires as well, if there was help involved, do you think there could be something for that?
They did have a series a number of years ago called Men in Black, where they covered Barry Kelly from Westmeath, Alan Kelly, the soccer referee that's now in the MLS, and David Coldrick. And the RTE did a series with David Coldrick's last All-Ireland final, which was 2015, and I think Fergal Horgan the following year in 2016, where they did have that microphone system wired up. I was fortunate enough this year for the All-Ireland final to have my microphone wired to the OB units, the outside broadcast units with Sky Sports and RTE. So co-commentator, I think it was Kevin McStay with RTE, and with Sky Sports, it should have been maybe Damien Lawler, had access to my microphone. And I was so lucky, and I have said this on a number of occasions, I was so lucky that Kevin McStay was commentator on the day of the All-Ireland final. He is the one analyst. I'm not going to call him a pundit, because he's not a pundit. He's the one analyst in RTE that actually has a good knowledge of the rules. And by listening to my conversations with the players and through his knowledge of the rules, he gave an excellent co-commentary on the day of the All-Ireland final. And when I sent off Johnny Cooper, he was well able to explain the reason why Johnny had to leave the field that day. If that had been another co-commentator, I could have been ridiculed from a height for actually implementing the correct rule. And Kevin was able to set the agenda and the discussion that followed based in fact actually on the day.
Brilliant. So yeah, I'm just trying to, as you know, as we were saying before, I put up the poll on Instagram, ask them questions, and I think we've covered quite a lot of them there. Some people did send in questions that I think would be more suited for the Ask Goughy on Twitter, so I don't want to go putting you on the spot even more. I suppose to wrap it up, David, we've got about 40 minutes so far out of this anyways. So the last question I have for you, I'm not sure is it something you've answered on camera before, but your funniest memory so far as a referee. Has there ever been an incident, whether it be in Croke Park or at your club pitch in Meath, that has just made you stand up and laugh on the field?
Yeah, there have been. I don't know how many I can tell on camera or how many I feel comfortable to tell on camera. I suppose simple things like if I slip in the middle of the field, or one of the umpires slips going for a flag, there's always a smart comment coming in from some of the lads that know me about, yellow card for diving. I have walked out into the middle of Croke Park to throw up the ball for a match, and not had a whistle. That was fairly embarrassing as well. I'd left a whistle in the dressing room. There's been funny incidents like that. There's funny incidents with players with conversations, but I certainly wouldn't say those on camera without the players' permissions. I don't know how comfortable they'd feel with the sort of jokes that happen on field, and they do happen. And genuinely, sometimes things are funny on a football field, and you just have to laugh at them, no matter how serious the situation is. And we do. I have a good enough rapport with the lads now, refereeing, that the players themselves can make jokes, and we get on quite well.
Brilliant, David. Thanks a million for joining me on the podcast.
Well, thanks for contacting me, and thanks for having me on.